The distinction and different expectations of travel journalists and travel writers has been a topic of debate for years. In the new digital environment, anyone can be a writer, anyone can be published, and anyone can be paid. However, the effect of such an opportunity has potentially blurred the ethical responsibilities of travel writing and increased the contempt towards sponsored content. It's important to firstly define travel journalism and travel writing. Travel journalism is the act of qualified journalists creating content which is specifically relevant to tourism and travel. This can be anywhere from independent blogs to paid articles from news organizations. Travel writing is similar in nature by the act of blogging or freelance work through an agency, however, writers lack a qualification. Journalists are required to adhere to strict principles within the Media, Entertainment and Arts Alliance, or the MEAA. Clause 5 and 6 of the MEAA outlines that journalists must disclose any conflicts of interest which impact accuracy, fairness, and independence, cannot use their journalist position for personal gain, and cannot allow commercial considerations to undermine their articles. Equally, the Australian Society of Travel Writers, or the ASTW, requires members to serve as travel critics, and members must not accept payments or courtesies in return for writing favourable content contrary to their true appraisal. Furthermore, the ASTW promotes fundamental principles that the writers should provide sound and accurate information to the public with honest and fair praise and criticisms as appropriate. On the surface, these guidelines seem coherent and simple. However, in an ever-changing digital landscape, it's not always apparent when certain articles have been sponsored. Sometimes on social media, journalists and writers will add disclaimers or disclosure clauses to indicate that the following article has been sponsored. However, it's not required and it's not heavily endorsed. The effects of such ambiguity is distrust in both the writer and the sponsoring agency. It creates animosity of exactly how trustworthy the source, articles, and company involved are, and whether there is any watchdog monitoring and confirming the quality and factualness of the article. Moreover, when journalists and writers receive monetary compensation for their articles, important principles such as accountability and transparency can be lost. Although sometimes travel writers and articles are not favourable about the sponsored travel, there is unfortunately no real capacity for consumers to check and authenticate the article. In response to such a glaring disparity, there needs to be strict guidelines for sponsorships which uphold accuracy and independence of articles and enforce disclaimers which indicate the relationship between the author and the experiences which are being recommended and ensure that the ethical codes are being abided by. In order to effect such an expectation, there needs to be an additional expectation that all travel writers are aware of what ethical codes there are. However, as referenced earlier, travel journalists have qualifications in communication and travel writers don't. Quite simply, the devil is in the degree. Overall, journalists are knowledgeably bound by expectations which are outlined in the acquisition of their degree. Throughout a journalism degree, students are constantly revising and upskilling themselves and importantly receiving feedback on the quality and legalities of their assessment. It's a well-known mantra that an assessment piece that has a misspelt name or an inaccurate source or a misinformed statement is grounds for a complete failing grade. This is not for the pleasure of university markers, but a genuine tactic to prepare students for the real world where one inaccuracy can be the undoing of their entire career. These important skills mean that travel journalists who begin engaging with audiences and agencies to publicize their work are already well versed in what's expected of them. That's not to say travel writers are not diligent themselves, but the ethical responsibilities are simply not something they've been previously forced to learn about. It would be a poorly concocted argument to accuse all travel writers of failing to maintain a professional journalism standard, as many of them come from other industries and are really informed and have been really successful. However, it's simply not in their domain to have the skills that journalists have had imparted on them throughout literal years of studying. The reality is, anyone can write an article. It's not the article that makes the distinction apparent. It's in the research and attribution and source permissions, fact-checking and disclosure clauses. Without a background on the ethics involved and the ramifications of such, it's just not at the forefront of someone's mind. The reality is that there's always going to be a disparity between journalists who write travel articles and travel writers. However, by affecting a standard which encompasses sponsored content, the general public can maintain confidence in the guidelines and system. Standards protect consumers and the public and ensure principles of transparency, fairness, accuracy, and accountability remain the highest priority for anyone producing sponsored content. Thanks.